Our Truth in Politics panel is back. Eagle Feather News editor Kerry Benjoe is in Regina. Niigaan Sinclair of the Winnipeg Free Press is here in town. Dennis spoke to the panel earlier about police violence.
Kerry, Niigaan, thanks for being with us as always. Kerry, I'll put this question to you first. Bear with me as I read off some numbers here, but according to the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, black people who make up 3.8% of the total population make up 8.1% of police-involved deaths. And while 5.1% of people in Canada are Indigenous, they make up 16.2% of people killed in police-involved deaths. Kerry, why do you think these numbers are so high?
Well, it's simple. Brown people, people of color, are seen as other. So when there are encounters that do happen, the police aren't so quick to understand the situation. Indigenous people are seen as violent, they're scary. And so this viewpoint of Indigenous and Black people, it impacts how they are treated within the justice system and how they are treated by police. And no amount of people saying this doesn't exist, the numbers prove it time and time again. It's Indigenous people that suffer, Indigenous people that suffer the worst. It is something that needs to be taken care of, and it has to do with creating a conversation about understanding Indigenous and Black people and treating them as human beings.
Niigaan, you know, we've anecdotally always heard this, but is it important, do you think, now to have the data to really back it up?
Yeah, I mean, the data is quite straightforward and it paints a pretty damning picture. I'll give some more statistics here. It is 5 times more likely for you, if you are an Indigenous woman, to experience violence. Indigenous girls and women and Two-Spirit people experience violence exponentially more. And also, if you are in an Indigenous community or an Indigenous community which you are the majority population, you are over-policed 7 to 8 times more. The fact is that policing is really an issue. And one of the most important things around policing is that the reaction of police and the training of police is fairly inadequate. I mean, it's not suitable any further to have awareness sessions when it's really an issue of misrepresentation and the ability for police officers to handle situations that they are thrust into when they frankly don't understand what's going on when it comes to the history of Indigenous peoples. And what I always tell police is that when you show up in a community, you are not thought of as a helper, you're thought of as a herder. And so that means that police officers, frankly, are not adequately prepared to go into these situations. And oftentimes, as a result, that's why we see so many of these deaths. You know, Manitoba last year had the highest amount of Indigenous homicides on record. And it isn't just at the hands of those in communities, it's also in situations involving incarceration.
Kerry, both you and Niigaan have touched on training here, but what can be done to reverse this trend, to reduce the numbers of Black and Indigenous people killed by police?
Like I said, it's humanizing the community. I think officers that are accepted into a community know what they need to do. We have RCMP officers that become a part of the community and they don't have issues because they make the extra effort to get to know the people that they're policing as people. They know how to judge a situation. That doesn't happen in these larger cities, in these larger places. There is an acceptance by the police services to treat Indigenous people and to treat Black people and treat brown people as the other. And it's okay to treat them the way they do because no one really does anything about it. Indigenous people are the only ones standing up and demanding justice. We don't see politicians, white politicians, coming forward and saying, you know, this needs to change. We need to do something. It's always the Indigenous people, Black people pushing for change. It doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the grassroots people.
Niigaan, just this week alone, we're hearing of cases involving alleged, incidents with police and Indigenous peoples in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, the Yukon, Kenora, Thunder Bay, all just in the last 4 days. Are these incidents on the rise, do you think, or are Indigenous peoples maybe feeling more confident in speaking out?
Yeah, I think it's also a mixture of both, but I totally agree, and we left Northwest Ontario where we saw some officers currently. I mean, we can't forget the situation of Thunder Bay. Much has been written about that situation out there as well. I mean, the reality is that, people have smartphones, people have abilities, social media. I mean, there's other ways for Indigenous people to tell our stories, so perhaps we're hearing more about this. But I also think that it's a reality in which things that have happened in the past were perhaps not thought of as police brutality or violence. And nowadays, people are much more versed on their rights. They're much more versed on the inadequate training that police officers are getting. And then, as Kerry pointed out, the fact that leadership really has left behind Indigenous peoples in this regard. I mean, we do have lots of non-Indigenous peoples who have said various things over the years, but perhaps not consistently in the same ways that Indigenous leaders have. And certainly for those who are in this issue, writing about this issue continually, barely a day goes by that my inbox doesn't get a story from a mother or from a person who has been arrested or a person who has had a brutal experience with police officers in our community. So this has almost become a situation of a national epidemic of violence, and it's often led by the very forces that we're supposed to protect.
Yeah, it could be a full beat for a reporter. Kerry, Niigaan, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks as always to you both.
Yeah, miigwech, thanks.